Okay, so we will call to order the special Board of Education meeting for Monday, November 23rd to order. If I could ask everyone to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
I pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag of the United States of
States of
America
America and
and
to the republic
for which it stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty and
and
justice
justice for all.
for all.
All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Jim Batson,
Here.
Don Carmichael,
Here.
Pat Grudy,
Here.
Lisa Hessel,
Here,
Kevin Huber,
Here.
Karen Lundstedt,
Here,
Casey Rooney.
here.
Okay, so we know that all board members are present tonight. Our agenda will open it up for public comment. Last I heard, we had 7. Is that still the current number, Mary?
Yes.
Okay, so we should be able to get all those read in. Then we're going to spend our time on school reopening. We'll have updates on diagnostic testing, vaccines, and the governor, IDPH, and ISBE decisions. We will review the metrics, then open it up for discussion, and as needed, may or may not take action on the hybrid learning implementation date. Okay, any other questions? Any questions? All right, so let's go to public comment.
Hey, Pat, before we do that,
Yeah.
just let me read into the record again what we've had on the agenda, is just so we're always up front with the public. Citizens may participate by providing written comment by email with the subject for public comment to public comment at D128 by November 23, 2020 at 4 p.m. Comments received after public posting of this board agenda until the Monday, November 23rd, 2020, 4 p.m. submission deadline will be read in the order received by the Director of Communications. Public comment received after the submission deadline will be shared with all board members. So.
Okay. The first letter is from Timothy McGrory. Dear board members, during the past 8+ months that District 128 schools have been closed, the school board has had robust discussions on the health risk of COVID to students, staff, and family members, but almost no mention of how remote learning affects our kids. Though the health risks of COVID are significant, the board should consider all factors impacting the well-being of our students. It would be a service to the D128 community if the board and administration could balance discussion of the COVID metrics and health risks with discussion of, 1, the impact of the extended school shutdown on students' emotional health and social development. For example, what is the increase in risk of depression, substance abuse, or suicide? How much does the risk increase as weeks and months are added to the total period of shutdown? What are long-term risks of extended isolation on social development of kids this age? 2, how is the district evaluating the effectiveness of remote learning? How far behind can we expect our students to fall academically compared to their local, national, or global peers attending in-person school? How will remote learning impact preparedness for the next level of their classes, whether in high school or college, performance on AP exams or standardized tests? And 3, on what research has the administration been relying in assessing the social, emotional, and academic impact of remote school? To what extent have doctors and mental health professionals been consulted in forming its recommendations? I ask that the board add the topic of student well-being and academic impact to the standing list of items you discuss each time the board meets. It would be helpful for the D128 community to hear on an ongoing basis, 1, the latest research on student impact, 2, feedback the administration is receiving from the outside experts with whom it consults, and 3, how these risks to our students may escalate with each passing week. To date, we have seen a board focused on weekly COVID data with little consideration of the other risks to our students who have been learning by computer and isolated from teachers and peers since last March. Each time the board delays reopening schools, the D128 community deserves an explanation of why the board believes the risks to our students' emotional health, social development, and academic success are less serious than the risk of COVID. If the board believes this to be true, it should support this on record with a demonstration of its careful consideration of all factors, not solely the COVID health risk. Thank you for the opportunity to reach out to the board. And the next letter is from Molly Wolf. Keep hiding in your basements and behind the computers too afraid to face the public you serve. Remember, you are not leaders, you are elected volunteers to facilitate the wants and needs of those who voted for you. We are in a wealthy district with resources. It is November of 2020, really December, and the best solution is to put struggling students in a library with a supervisor. We have been doing this since March, and this solution, while it is a start, is far from the standards I, as a parent, resident, and taxpayer of District 128, would expect to see. What I also find outrageous is your very feeble solution to start bringing children into the schools in completely unfair when Brown versus Board of Education clearly states separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. I do not know how the education system finds this fair and equal. I am not an attorney, but I hope to be part of lawsuits against D128 and D70. District 128 has failed these children from the school board's cowardly decision not to open the doors, administration not coming up with proactive alternatives for all students, and finally the unions making decisions in the best interest and not in the interest of children. History will judge all of you, and when these children enter the world and mature, they will realize how you all collectively failed them and put them in a colossal disadvantage to those learning in school systems where quick, innovative, and forward thinking was applied. I hope they make you all accountable. The next message is from Alma Miranda. Dear board members, it has been 244 days since my daughter has seen the inside of her school. She is stressed out. It is unnatural for her to be stuck in her room for over a year now. Prisoners get better treatment. The complete mental breakdown that happens often to these kids are completely disregarded. This week, despite her having joined her Zoom class, she was marked truant. It is easy enough for the teachers. For me, it means I have to take even more steps to contact the teacher and let him know that she was actually in class. Why are parents expected to put so much time into the education of their children right now? We are not actually homeschooling them. We have paid our taxes. Again, we have issues with our Wi-Fi. She wasn't able to connect to a different class. Why are you continuing to punish our kids? Yes, we have heard that these are unprecedented times, but in the past, school has always been prioritized. When will it be time to focus on the kids? When? 2022, 2023? This board continues to point their fingers at everyone else. I know some of the superintendents who have contacted the Illinois Department of Public Health have been told that it is ultimately up to the schools to open or not, namely the Lake Zurich School District. Yet this board continues to choose to remain 100% remote. You have built up the hopes of my child that she may see the inside of a classroom only to shatter them to pieces when you start to get nervous again. There is no evidence that school can not open safely. In Europe, despite extreme lockdowns, they have prioritized keeping their schools open. Why? Because it is better for the children and for the communities. Teachers there are there to teach in person. Is it that European value education more? It appears so. Our kids in District 128 deserve better. They deserve an education. My daughter has to teach herself via YouTube and other research she does because the teacher just rushes through and don't explain anything. They are consistently hard on grading despite not teaching the material properly. The kids can't focus. What you are doing with not giving them the option to go in person is ensuring that D128 kids will not have the high standards that their predecessors had. They will be behind in college. They already missed some important college deadlines because she's not in school to hear those. There are many kids in the school that are less privileged than others. They live in small houses with larger households. They are helping their younger brothers and sisters with their schoolwork so their parents can physically go to work. It is very difficult for these students to concentrate on their studies. Why are you not thinking of these children? Not everyone in this district has the luxury to work from home. Others do work from home, but it is still very difficult for them to work. The evidence and support for kids to be in school is clear. Just this week, Vice President Pence reinforced that those you may have not heard him say it before, that the coronavirus task force and the CDC do not and have never recommended school closures. Please refer to the link below. Likewise, Dr. Anthony Fauci also mentioned in an interview that he believes that we need to keep kids in school. Please click on the link to see the interview. Why are you refraining from opening the schools when the evidence is clearly for opening the schools? Give the kids their school back. They deserve it, and parents and taxpayers of this district deserve it. They also deserve to be taught in school by the actual teachers, not held out in the cafeteria by themselves looking at a screen. That is not in person. That is just a change of scenery for them. I appreciate your time, and I trust that you will make the decision that will provide my child a robust in-school experience. The next letter is from Alyssa Wasserman. I think we all agree that kids need in-person school. However, we are in a pandemic. Our community members who are posting on Facebook saying the teachers have their own agenda and that COVID doesn't come into school are uninformed. Many schools have had outbreaks and had to shut down soon after reopening. Our district has increased COVID cases, and those are just the ones that we know about. It will not be safe to return to hybrid until our community commits to stopping the parties and social gatherings. And until then, I do not feel safe sending my students to school. It is exhausting and stressful for everyone when the board continually changes the decision of hybrid versus remote. Also, it will be more stressful to go hybrid right after Thanksgiving when only a few weeks left in the semester, especially when COVID cases are in an all-time high and holiday travel is coming up. We should finish the semester with remote learning and plan to go hybrid next semester when it's safe. Thank you. The next letter is from Irene Edgar to the school board. I am writing in support of continuing all remote schooling until at least January. Libertyville and Vernon Hills have not been immune to the recent skyrocketing in cases. We all know that people will be gathering for Thanksgiving. We also know that many high schoolers have older siblings who will be coming home from college for Thanksgiving, since many colleges are turning to remote schooling after Thanksgiving. Hospitals all over the country are filling up and running out of staff to care for patients quicker than they are running out of space. If there ever was a time not to begin hybrid schooling, this is it. The next message is from Dale Sherman. And this says, Dear Dr. Lee, Dr. Grudy, and members of the D128 board. We are 222 District 128 students and parents with a very simple proposed plan we respectfully ask you to vote on tonight. We propose that you vote tonight to move to hybrid on Monday, January 18th, come hell or high water, absent a specific order from the governor that all schools must be remote without exception. The January 18th date will allow families of both teachers and students to stay isolated for 14 days after winter break. A firm date will also allow our teachers and parents to make appropriate adaptations to their daily routines. There is no reason to continue hurting the students in dozens of ways, all under the false pretense of protecting them from the virus. Voting for this plan tonight would show leadership, creativity, and a commitment to the mission of the board promoting the best interest of the students. Yes, you can find a way to vote on this item tonight. You found a way to avoid a vote and go by a consensus to further delay hybrid on November 9th. Find a way tonight to vote on this plan and unanimously vote in favor of it. The students are suffering academically, emotionally, socially, and physically. They desperately need your help. Virtual instruction, despite the best efforts of many excellent teachers, is not coming close to meeting the educational standards of our district. If this board does not vote for a firm hybrid start date tonight, you will be cementing the majority opinion that you have abdicated all leadership responsibility and completely abandoned the students. If abdication is all you continue to offer, please resign and let others step in to provide true leadership. Don't let fear allow you to continue your painfully slow walk down the path of least resistance. Vote tonight to ensure the hybrid program will absolutely begin on January 18th, 2021. Thank you for your consideration. Would you like me to read the 222 names?
Pat, or we could post those in the chat, Pat.
Yeah, let's post them. I mean, I don't see a need to read all those. We've done that before. But I don't personally think it's necessary tonight to read all those names.
All right.
We'll post them. Let's make sure everybody has seen them. We'll post them publicly and do whatever we need to do. And I'll encourage all the board members to make sure they look at the entire list of names.
And the final letter is from Jennifer Abel. Dear board, I encourage you to pass a vote to open our schools today. Research continues to be published from universities and the CDC about the safety of the school environment. There are also publications citing the adverse mental and physical health effects that full school closure is having on students, especially teens. This is something I am witnessing in our community. Just a few days ago, the director of the CDC stated, K-12 schools should remain open as they are one of the safest places children can be during the CCP virus pandemic. Today, there's extensive data that we have gathered over the last 2 or 3 months to confirm that K through 12 schools can operate with face-to-face learning, and they can do it safely and they can do it responsibly. The charge of an educator is to make decisions that are best for our kids, not best for the adults. I implore you to open our schools immediately following the hybrid model the district created. Thank you. And that's all of our letters.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary, for reading all of those. Okay. Let's move on to updates. Prince, do you want to start on diagnostic testing or do you want me to?
Well, Pat, maybe we can start with some really good news tonight. Let me start with vaccines and then you can go to diagnostic testing and we'll work on that together. How about that?
That's fine.
Okay, there is actually for all of the members in the board meeting tonight, everybody watching in the public, there's actually, believe it or not, some good news on the horizon. And it is, I think, truly good news. I'm in a group of superintendents. This is meeting once a week with the executive director of the Lake County Health Department. And of course, they're updating us every week on a number of things that are going on. But last week in general, they let us know that as the vaccine trail from the federal government to the states and then from local counties is being established, that it looks like in January and February that first responders, healthcare professionals, citizens in need, namely senior citizens, nursing homes, those kinds of things, would be in a phase, without putting a title on this, in concept, a phase 1 of vaccinations. And then in March and April, they are anticipating that a phase 2 vaccination will start, which will include school personnel as essential workers. And of course, that will help move us along the path toward normalcy And then, as the year progresses, I'll get more updates, of course, of what that's going to look like. But there is a possibility that decision-making into next school year can actually look at the possibility of opening school normally next year. So that is some terrific news. All of you know, we're all watching the same news. We're all reading the same news that two companies, Moderna and Pfizer, both have vaccines. I saw a third company today, Pat. I can't remember who that was.
AstraZeneca.
Yes, that's at 75%, but the two main ones right now are at 95% effectiveness. I do want to let the board know that because we've had discussions about this before, that at the current time, vaccination for COVID-19 is not part of the required school vaccination package as the legislature starts working again. I am certain that my colleagues and I will be advocating with our legislators and with the governor to include that as a required vaccination to come to school in the future. That's not the state that we're in right now, but it is certainly encouraging news given the last 8 or 9 months of pretty challenging news.
Yeah. Okay, any questions on the vaccines? Okay. All right, you want to talk about diagnostic testing next, Prince?
Sure, Pat, that'd be great. You want to lead us off or do you want me to start?
Why don't you start? Because you've got the news on the CLIA waiver.
Okay, again, there's been a lot of publicity on, Pat, I can't remember the exact number that Abbott is committed to the federal government on the Binax now. Is it 500,000?
150 million.
150 million. So 150 million Binax now. Pat can explain this much better than I can, but second gen rapid testing from Abbott, very encouraging. So the federal government has procured the first 150 million test kits, if you will. They're going to distribute those through the state again. The state will then be distributing our allocation through local levels. We were encouraged a couple of weeks ago or about a week ago, by the Lake County Health Department to, if you will, get in line for potential allocation. And part of what that requires is us doing what's called a CLIA waiver. So Dan and I worked with Pat, filled out the CLIA waiver. Dan reported this afternoon that we have our CLIA waiver, liability waiver number now, which is important for two reasons. One, to be able to work with the county when the Binax now comes through the federal government. And then two, with an opportunity that's really become available probably over the last 5 or 6 work days. And that is to work directly with Abbott, who is going to work with government agencies like schools. Again, we need to have that CLIA liability waiver. We now have our number, so we can move forward with completing an application for potential work with Abbott. We haven't made any decisions yet, as a board in terms of how we'll pursue that, because Pat has continued to do background work. We're working with a third-party provider that could administer those test kits for us if we did that in large number. But we need to have more conversation about, who the target would be, how often that would be, et cetera, particularly since we now know that we might be able to access more Binax Now tests directly through Abbott beyond what the state can give us. So those things, again, are all good news as we move down the path.
Are those the tests that are really inexpensive, Pat?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, so Don, the actual cost of the test from Abbott is $5. We're obviously still in discussions with our provider on what the actual cost per reportable result would be. Obviously, it'd be higher than $5, but we don't have a number yet. But it would honestly be a fair amount of money in total. But I think it's something that we need to seriously consider and could most likely afford. All right. I actually just prior to this call got off a meeting. It was actually a webinar done by a professor from the University of Illinois, a guy named Paul Hergenrother, and he was actually responsible for implementing the saliva-based testing at U of I. And they actually test their students twice a week, and they've just had some tremendous success in actually reducing the positivity rate, not only at the University of Illinois, but in the surrounding community as well. And he believes strongly it was the, regular frequent testing that was a big part of the success that they've shown so far. And they expect to continue to do that throughout the spring semester. So this testing would be a different test, and its performance is a little different. But the idea would be that, we would consider some routine periodic testing of our students and staff. It would have to be voluntary. We're not able to mandate it like U of I could for their students. I mean, U of I, if you haven't heard, they literally have an app that tells your testing status. And if your testing status is red, either because it's positive or you didn't get tested on schedule, you can't get into the buildings. And so that's how they've controlled it. And that's how they've been successful through in-person learning. All right. So I would just like some quick feedback. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but I'd like to know kind of from the board perspective, are we still in support of pursuing this? And then honestly, I know the community's kind of done with surveys based on some of the feedback we've gotten on this, but I'd like to actually ask the question as well, whether or not it's worth a very quick and concise survey to the community to understand their willingness to support this if we did put it through. Quite frankly, a program like this is only effective if you get a very high, level of participation. If we only got 10 or 20% of our students that would be willing to sign up to do this, it's honestly not worth doing. But if we were able to get a much larger percentage of our community to support it, again, not just for the schools, which is certainly part of it, but it's also a good thing for the community, since it's also well published that 30 to 50% of the spread is from asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic infections. But I'd like to discuss whether or not you guys feel it's reasonable, number one, to continue to pursue the program. Number two, to consider surveying our VHHS and LHS community to gauge their level of support.
Hey, Pat, one more just clarification before we move forward with the conversation, and that is part of the reason we're working with a third-party vendor that's working with some other schools districts in the area, including Lake Forest and Barrington, I think is about where we're at in the process, but we'll likely move that direction as well, is that they have a medical staff, and if we do this on a grander scale, then they would become our third-party vendor. They would have the medical techs and the wherewithal to do that, where we would not be able to do that. They can also work with us on contact tracing. So there's a lot of benefit in terms of working that direction. So Pat, I just wanted to make that clarification.
No, it's a good point.
If somebody's 3 steps down the line and saying, well, how will we manage that on a grander scale, like Pat is talking about on a somewhat regular basis, that's where a third-party vendor would come in and work with us, and we can take care of their resources, and they're set up with a company that's got a good reputation in terms of doing this.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Pat.
No, that's a good point, because the scale of this is not something to take lightly. I mean, again, depending on the amount of participation we would get, and I'm going to assume we would want to test weekly. All right. And again, the theory there is if you test every week, you might miss an infection in the first week, but you're going to catch it in the second week. And so the sooner you catch that, the less it'll spread. It's probably upwards of 1,500 tests or so a week, which is not something, I mean, we're certainly not equipped to do that, but this particular vendor would be very well equipped to be able to do that. It's very similar to the testing that's being done in corporations like Abbott and others, where they're essentially screening their employees and testing them at least weekly for those that are working on site. All right. So yeah.
And this would include the staff as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Testing, right.
Yeah. And we may treat that separately. We may have a different decision on staff versus students. I mean, some of the feedback that I have heard from companies that are doing this, at first it's kind of awkward for employees to go get tested every week. But what they find is that after they've been doing it for a couple of weeks, they start to feel more comfortable. They're more comfortable working in their environment. And it gives them some level of confidence that the safety mitigations that are in place are working and doing what they need to. So again, I'll just open it up briefly for any comments or questions.
So I definitely like the idea of pursuing it. And I am strongly in favor of surveying the community. I think that it's important that we continue to listen to the community. We're all a bit fatigued, but I think community input is key, because if we don't have, as you said, a majority of people participating, then it really is meaningless. The thing I want to note, though, is at places like University of Illinois and Duke University that have been very successful with frequent testing, it's not just the testing that has been successful at keeping their infection rates down. They've had testing in conjunction with contact tracing and quarantine and a social contract that everybody's cooperating with. So I think all of those factors need to be accounted for. Testing alone can't really work any special magic. All of those things need to be in place. But I'm very much in favor of continuing the conversation and making that a part of the safety protocols that we can offer when we do return.
Yeah, Lisa, you're exactly right. And Dr. Hergenrother made that exact point tonight. Okay, so yes, they're doing testing. Part of the success is you have to have rapid turnaround time. All right, and so that's why we're looking at the rapid AVID test. But the other thing he said was real important. He said that they had some issues with this early on, was in fact the compliance, not only to getting tested on the periodic basis, but also compliance with quarantining and doing the things that, when you are positive and, not behaving inappropriately. So you're absolutely right. That's it. It's a whole system that has to work together. Okay, as well as this is just one other element of protection in addition to the other mitigations we have in place, including masks, including social distancing, including all of the cleaning things. I mean, no one of these mitigations is perfect. These are all intended to just provide additional layers of protection. So great points, Lisa. Any other comments?
Yeah, would you
False configures.
say that it would be, oh, sorry, Don, go ahead.
Sorry.
Would you say that even if we didn't get enough of a student response that would be willing to do it, that it would be worth it for the faculty, the staff?
That would be
just for their own protection, for their own confidence, and is it would that also be voluntary, or would that be required?
So I don't. I'll pass it to Prentice on the required thing. I would say, but to answer your question from my own personal perspective, I absolutely think that we would want to encourage our student or our faculty and staff to get tested. And again, if for no other reason, and this is what we've heard, including from Lake Forest, it does give it gives their staff at least some feeling of an additional level of protection if they know what their status is, if they're getting tested routinely. We've heard very positive things about what's going on in Lake Forest.
Karen, I believe it's voluntary at Lake Forest, but I think they have a pretty, with the staff, I think they have a pretty, of the teachers who are coming in, I think they have a fairly high rate of compliance. I'll probably be talking to Mike Simic tomorrow from Lake Forest, the superintendent of Lake Forest High School and Elementary District. And so I'll confirm that. It is not currently a condition of employment covered by our collective bargaining agreement. So it would probably be voluntary, but I'd certainly work with Union President Dennis Duffy and exec board from the union and the administration to talk about the efficacy of being able to do that and the benefits of being able to do that. But we have to investigate the legality in terms of requiring it further.
Yeah, and let me make one other comment. So let's assume for the moment it is the rapid antigen test. I know a lot of people are concerned about false positives with that. Any program that I would recommend we put in place would include some confirmatory testing of any positives that we get. All right, so at a minimum you would get some initial result, and that would have to be confirmed before we actually determine that a person is positive. So we would certainly want to protect against that.
Well, Pat, and I think in our conversations with Dr. Morcott from Passport Health, part of the service that they would provide is doing the secondary testing. And so an individual would go to their office. They actually have an office in Vernon Hills here on Ring Road over by the mall. And the person can go over there and get tested and follow-up testing, to confirm that test. So because there, is the possibility for false positives.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So again, we would, and most likely the confirmatory test would be a PCR test. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll continue to pursue that, and I will work with the administrative team then to try to put together a very brief survey, and we'll get a sense of what the community support is. I think it's I think this is something that the community could certainly do to make our, opening our schools even safer. And I think it would be a great thing for the community to show their support by supporting this initiative if we can get it done, which really could boil down to just the availability and access to the tests.
Hey, Pat.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a good thing to do. I also think, especially if we can, I don't want to say advertise, but really encourage and educate the community on the value of this. We have people from all spectrums. We have people that say, we want our kids back in school. We have people that say, no, I want my kids safe at home. And I think it could address all the needs of all those people. The people that want their kids back in school, it gives them an extra level of security that the schools are even safer than what they would normally be. And those that want to keep their kids at home because they're afraid of what's might happen in the schools, it would give them a sense of safety if we can get a significant number of students and staff tested. So I just think it's a good thing all the way around if we can really get participation levels at a point where we need them and really help bridge us into that, once the vaccine gets around and help us through into the spring.
Okay.
Hey, Pat, before we leave this area, I want to do a little shout out to Kevin, because Kevin's done a lot of work behind the scenes. It usually ends up being you and I that are talking. But Kevin's got some contacts behind the scenes, and he's been great about following up with those contacts, sharing that information with you, making sure that we're working, we're all working together and kind of rowing the boat the same way. So Kevin, just a shout out to you, and thanks for your work behind the scenes, and hopefully all that work's going to come to a place that it will actually help everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Thank you, Kevin. All right. Governor, IDPH, ISBE.
Yeah, we've got all the acronyms there, right? So we've got Governor, the Illinois Department of Public Health, Illinois State Board of Education, and the Lake County Health Department decisions, guidance, and our recommendations, because this really comes up every time we talk. So what does it all mean for schools? So just to make clear, so, we all hear the same thing at the same time in the public ears, the same thing. The governor has us in phase 4, tier 3. It does not have an impact on schools, okay? The governor has left those decisions at this point up to local school boards, whatever those decisions are. That would also be true for the follow-up guidance in practice from IDPH and ISBE. And then the Lake County Health Department, as you know, recommended 2 or 3 weeks ago now that, everyone take a pause in the county for remote learning. But I just want to make clear that that is a recommendation. That's not a guidance statement, and it's not a requirement statement. So just to be upfront with everyone, the decision to make about schools opening, not opening, starting, stopping at this point are still in the local arena by local school boards. That's sometimes confusing for people, and we always get a follow-up question on that. So I just wanted to be upfront that that's what that means. Okay, the governor has not closed down schools at this point, and Lake County Health Department still has its recommendation to follow and be very cautious about that. But it is a recommendation. It is not a requirement, or in our world, when IDPH or ISB uses guidance, that means requirement. So it is not that. It's a recommendation from the health department. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear.
Okay. Any other things you want to update on that topic then?
No, Pat, I think we can move on to metrics review if you're ready.
Okay, so let me just make a comment on this for the community. So yes, we will spend some time looking at the latest metrics. It's a presentation that I put together over the weekend. But I would like everybody in the community to understand that in addition to these metrics and the numbers that we present in this, I have also provided board members with a number of references, including when I get references from the community, I include those, and they cover the range of topics on COVID, okay? And they include a lot of the references that where there is an increasing body of evidence that suggests that there are not super spreading events in schools. They include comments from the CDC. They include comments from Dr. Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner. They include, things that are both, I will say, in support of opening schools as well as things that are not in support of opening schools. So I think as a board, we're working very hard to evaluate the total body of data available to us, not just data in support of any one of the, I'll call it, two options we have in front of us. So I do want the community to understand that we're looking at a lot of different kinds of information, not simply the metrics that come from IDPH or Lake County. In addition to that, I also shared information this week with people that includes at least some information with respect to what's happening in our surrounding states, including Indiana, including Michigan, including Wisconsin, just to provide a somewhat broader perspective, because I think in general, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan schools have been open more so than many in Illinois. So again, it's a fairly broad set of data. I do certainly appreciate all the other articles that our community members bring to our attention, because oftentimes there are things that either I or other board members are not aware of. I can assure you that any and all of those things that are sent are reviewed by me and others. So appreciate that very much. Okay, Brian, if you want to throw the presentation up. Okay, I did not include these two metrics in the last time reviewed it. Back up one slide. Okay, but I put those in this week's update. Just this is the Lake County data overall for the incidence rate per 100,000 and the diagnostic turnaround time. Nothing surprising here, as we've been talking about and as has been widely reported, we're in the midst of a very significant spike. But the good news is things are starting to plateau off, okay, or level off. We're seeing that both in Libertyville and Vernon Hills as well as in Lake County. We'll see more of that data later. But just to put this in perspective, the current metric is supporting virtual learning model. And the threshold was 14 per 100,000. We're now at about almost 80 per 100,000. So call it, better of 5 or 6 fold over that threshold. And that's why it's triggered the virtual learning. The testing turnaround still says hybrid learning model indicated. This metric still intrigues me because it says 3 days. And I know even when we had the mobile testing sites, it was 4 to 7 days before testing results were provided. So this data suggests it's a little quicker than that. That's certainly not the case in the mobile testing sites done by IDPH. But those are the overall 2 of the Lake County metrics. Next slide.
And then
Yeah.
there's a third metric that's included with these 2, which is hospitalization rate.
And we're going to get to that in the other one as well. But go ahead, Lisa, you can comment on it.
If you're getting to it.
I don't have that chart. If you want to speak to that chart, feel free.
So what that chart indicates right now is that we are, the latest data was reported on November 17th. 7-day rolling average of hospital admissions in Lake County was 28, and that's a rolling average. And that puts us in the virtual learning model.
Yeah.
And above it.
Yeah. 2 of the 3 metrics showed virtual. 1 of them showed hybrid. And then you'll see some other information on hospitalizations coming up in a second.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide.
Hey, Pat, just a
Yep.
quick question.
Yep.
Do we know how these thresholds were set?
No, I mean, again, Kevin, I don't have the detail on that. I think in prior sessions, I provided some other information on some thresholds in other states. And I think, my sense of it was these thresholds weren't vastly different. They weren't vastly more conservative or more aggressive than what I'd seen in other states, but I really can't speak to exactly how these thresholds were set.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is obviously New York's getting hammered for their 3% positivity close to schools. versus Indianapolis has like 10% positivity. They'll keep their schools open. So, I mean, again, I just didn't know who was responsible for setting these metrics. Or if any, I guess I should ask.
Yeah,
if
they're
anybody understands them.
IDPH probably.
they're set locally.
Are they?
And-
Yeah, I don't quite understand the arbitrariness of them. So I guess it's just a struggle.
Yeah.
You know,
that's been true throughout. Okay. And again, you know, I can only speak for myself personally. I mean, I'm tending to rely less and less on the specific thresholds of some of these metrics, and you know, we can talk about that as we get through this, because I don't think any of these numbers are absolute and perfect, and I don't think we've ever committed ourselves to saying, okay, we are not going back if any one of these metrics say virtual learning model indicated. I know some other school districts have kind of done that. In my opinion, if they've done that, they've kind of boxed themselves into a bit of a corner. We have not done that, specifically because I think there is other data, like a lot of the publications that I reference that are talking about, you know, spreading in schools and things like that. So I don't know. I can't speak to the specifics of it though.
okay, thanks.
Okay, next slide. Okay, this is back in the format that I've been doing this in. This is from the school's dashboard, showing again the rolling incidents in Libertyville and comparing that to Lake County. So again, we are doing quite a bit better than Lake County overall, but still firmly in the remote region per the Lake County Health Department guidance. Okay. You know, when I used to present this without that spike, there was a bigger gap between in-person, hybrid, and remote. Now with the spike, these numbers have kind of collapsed together. But the bottom line is we're significantly in the remote region. But the good news is things have not only plateaued, they've actually started to decrease. And so that's a favorable thing. We'll see what happens to this as we go through these Thanksgiving holidays and what happens. Next slide. Same is true on the positivity. All right. So again, this 7-day rolling average positivity rate. This is probably the number you can see most. I will say this number, in my opinion, is not helpful right now. The last reported data point as of last night was 11.7. I didn't actually look at this just before the meeting, but this data continues to lag behind. And that's why I have additional calculations, I think, in 3 slides from now, which actually give you more current data. Next slide. Again, we're seeing similar trends in Vernon Hills. A spike, it sort of plateaued out. Now it's starting to come down a little bit. Again, firmly in the remote region relative to the Lake County specs, so to speak. Next slide. And then again, the positivity rate, which again is almost 2 weeks behind. So not real useful information, in my opinion, right now. Right. So then next slide. All right, so again, this data is calculated manually from the data in the Daily Herald website, number one. Number two, I've triangulated this data with the data being published by Northwestern on their dashboard, and I can tell you the numbers correlate almost identically, all right? So even though these are manual calculations that I've done based on the Lake County Daily Herald data, the Northwestern dashboard presents essentially the same data. It's a little different in the middle because they threw out the 1 day where they started to report the presumptive positives. All right. But now that's all thrown out either way. It's not in the calculation. So when we met last time, we were starting to spike. We were upwards of 10, 12% positivity rate. At that point, frankly, we were not sure whether it was going to continue to go north and go even as high as 20%, which is actually about where they are in some of the towns in McHenry County. The good news is we have seen these numbers drop quite a bit. And so right now for the last 4 or 5 days, Libertyville and Vernon Hills are hovering between just under 8% and just over 8%. So they're really kind of trending just about 8%. So
can I ask a question real quick?
Yep.
So if the Lake County Health Department isn't posting data since 11/7, then why does the Daily Herald and Northwestern have data?
So good question, Karen, and I don't know specifically. I know what we have heard is that they have had some trouble with their system. They were working with IBM to get it fixed. I don't know whether that's what's driving the continued delay and pushing that data to their computer system. I don't know.
Yep.
But every day, the Daily Herald website publishes the number of tests performed, the number of cases reported. And as I said, that's lining up exactly with the data published in the Northwestern website. So from what we understand, it's a system problem. Others have said they're so far behind in testing results, but I don't believe that because they're still reporting cases. So
But they must be sending their numbers, or
yeah,
somehow Northwestern and the Daily Herald are able to access those numbers.
the labs are reporting numbers and they're reporting positive.
Thank you.
I think, Karen, what happens is for the county health departments, they have to send their data. They have to send their data to IDPH. IDPH processes it and sends it back in a format. And Pat is correct. We've been told several times that they're having significant trouble with their mainframe, IBM mainframe in Springfield. And so I think, Northwestern or the newspaper could probably call and get the raw data, right? And they don't have to wait for it to be filtered back in a format that IDPH is putting that data back out in. Would be my guess. I think I'm pretty close there.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we're running right now about an 8% positivity rate, which is right on that threshold of substantial risk. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the data. So this actually is data for Lake County overall. So you see the Lake County positivity rate through 11/19 was the rolling 7-day average was 14.2%. So again, quite a bit higher than the Libertyville Vernon Hills data, which is encouraging. And I apologize, the two charts below as they are reported on the website are really not very clear. But I think the important data is on the right-hand side here. And this is the data I've shown over the last 3 times I've presented this. When we started a couple of weeks ago, ICU bed availability was at 47% throughout Lake County. The last time we met, it had decreased to 42%, and it's now at about 25%, almost at the threshold of 20% that IDPH indicates as a significant warning signal. Hospital bed availability overall has dipped below that threshold. So what we're seeing is, in addition to an increase in number of cases, an increase in the positivity rate, we're obviously seeing an increase in both the hospitalizations in general, as well as the number of people being hospitalized, put into ICU beds. So to those that actually say a lot of this is just because we're doing more testing and all that kind of stuff, well, no, we're seeing more cases and we're seeing more people hospitalized. Okay. Next slide. And again, this is just additional data. And again, I've shown the last 3 times that I've presented it. So if you look at just after the middle of October, the new cases per 100,000 in Lake County overall was 170 per 100,000. Keep in mind the threshold on this metric for what they call substantial spread is 100. All right. So even as of 10/24, we were over those numbers. We are now 6 times over that number in Lake County. All right. In Libertyville and Vernon Hills, we're actually closer to about 300, 350. So again, but much better than Lake County overall. There has been an increase in testing, no question, but there's been a significant increase in the positivity. It's more than doubled in the last 3 or 4 weeks. You're also seeing this actually is a pretty good indication of the increase in the number of people going to the emergency department with COVID-like illness. It's almost tripled in the last 3 to 4 weeks. The number of COVID-like infection admissions has almost doubled in the last 2 weeks. And then the number of deaths is actually, again, more than doubled in the last 3 weeks. All right. So I think, again, highlighting the severity, I will highlight on the deaths, if you've been following that at all, the vast majority of those deaths are in elderly population, primarily 70 years old and older. Very few deaths lower than that, not zero, but very few, which I think is is obviously a very, very good sign for the majority of the community. Next slide. This is just this just breaks out the Region 9 data by Lake County and McHenry County. All right, so you can still see the Region 9 is being heavily influenced by McHenry County. Lake County in general is quite a bit better than McHenry. And again, Libertyville, Vernon Hills, quite a bit better than Lake County. Next slide. This was one slide as I dug further and further into the metrics. I don't know if this is new data that they've published on the website or this is just data that I hadn't seen before. But I thought it was a good chart to show you actually that the biggest spike in cases is actually in the age group of 18 to 22. So that's the green line. So it compares really school age cases anywhere from elementary school to high school to college. But I thought it was interesting to point out that of the, what is it, roughly 300, almost 400 new cases reported in the week ending 11/14, almost half of those were in the age group of 18 to 22. And again, almost, well, a little more than a third of them in our high school age, ages 12 to 17. And that has also been increasing through the month of October. Okay, next slide. School outbreaks continue to be relatively low. I will tell you that the data on the Illinois website is a little confusing in the sense that they have one pie chart, which I showed last time, that shows all of the contributors to outbreaks. For some reason on that pie chart, at least over the weekend, schools were not included. I don't understand that. But if you actually go to another part of the website, in Illinois, in the last 30 days, there have been 15 school outbreaks. There have been none in Lake County. There's been one in McHenry County. All right, so relatively small number, I think, especially when you compare it to the likes of some of the things I sent you in regards to Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana. So I'm not sure what that means, really.
Can you define what outbreak means? Like, do they have a number assigned to that?
I believe, Karen, that it's if they have 2 or more cases that they believe were related to school transmission. Okay. So they had to be, if I understand it correctly, there were 2 or more cases that were linked.
Bryant, are you out there? Can you unmute for a minute?
Yeah, it
Yes,
was
they
2 or
changed.
more, and now they've changed it to 5 or more.
And they're looking at schools that are in session, in hybrid models, and at schools that, this includes schools that are in remote.
No, this would be mostly hybrid or in person, Karen.
Because I know our school district showed up on one of these lists once as a school that they were looking at. I just thought that caught me off guard a little bit.
Most of the time, they're not including people that are doing remote learning. Whether or not they included us because it was related to a sports thing, I don't know.
Yeah, because that would be in school.
Yeah. And again, you know, I think within Illinois and certainly across other states, I know Indiana in particular, a lot of the school data is voluntary. And so that's why really across the country, it's been very, I'm going to say disorganized, or certainly not well organized with respect to the ability to capture this data and really understand fully what's going on in schools. I mean, the one report I heard was a state that's doing a pretty good job of this is Utah. But most other states are either having trouble or just not doing a very good job of capturing the outbreak data from schools. Now, having said that, let's be clear, because I know a lot of residents have sent us emails on it. There is certainly an emerging and growing body of data that supports that schools are not a major source of spread, that many of the cases even that are identified in schools are from spread occurring through other means, social activities, in the home, and things like that. So I guess I want to send a message to those that continue to inform us that we understand that. I get it. That's certainly a true statement. Okay. Is that it, or is there another slide there? Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. Good news is things didn't get a lot worse than what we reviewed last time. In fact, they have in some cases gotten a little bit better. The bad news is we're obviously still above any thresholds that would support moving to hybrid learning, per at least the way the metrics are established. But I think it's encouraging that we haven't continued to go upwards. I gotta be honest. Last time we were sitting here, I was quite concerned that locally we could see positivity rates nearing 20%, and I'm just glad to say that that has not yet occurred. And so we've come down to about 8% at this point. Okay. Any other questions on the data? Comments on the data? How are we feeling about the data? Okay.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I guess my only comment on the metrics is that, and this goes back to the county. That's why the decision is made at the local area. Us, the county's concerned, health department's concerned about spread. I think we all have to agree with their responsibility is to be concerned about the spread, right? That's why they do these things. That's perfectly fine. And I'm not so sure why they recommend. Well, I do know why they recommend remote, in-person, things like that. They make those recommendations worrying about the spread. I think, because I want to make sure we kind of have this discussion a little bit. And I think our responsibility has got to be worried about the kids. And I think we all probably agree kids are first and foremost, as are our staff. But I think Pat and Prentice and Lisa and I, we talked with the teachers a long time ago. And I think we really did a nice job. And let's be very clear so the community knows the teachers are ready to go back. They were ready to go back last week, last month, whenever it was. So this, that is a thing we need to make sure we get out there. But again, to our board, I guess I have to ask, are we all in agreement that the number one responsibility, our fiduciary responsibility, is to the kids? I mean, I have to understand that before we start talking about implementation date. And so I'd like to have that discussion.
Yeah. So Kevin, I'll throw out my comments. Of course, our number one, our primary concern, I believe, is the kids. I think a big part of that, of course, is the safety of the kids, but also I think related to that is being able to deliver them the kind of education we want to give them. All right. The only other thing I'll throw at it, and someone mentioned New York. So yes, New York is getting beat up very badly because they closed the schools at a 3% positivity rate. All right. Again, by reference, ours is 8%. But they're getting beat up for not only the 3% positivity rate, but the people like Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's a former FDA commissioner, is saying they did it wrong. Okay. They closed the schools down when what they really should be doing is they should be working in the community to close down virtually everything else that needs to be closed down in order to control the community spread so they can keep the schools open. Okay. So I think the only thing I would challenge based on what you said is just that absolutely we care about the kids, but I think we also have to care about the community spread and make sure that as a community, we're taking whatever actions we can to limit the community spread in order to, in our case, open the schools. And then once we do that, keep them open. I've heard from residents that are obviously not happy that the schools are closed, but I've heard from residents that are said the only thing that could be worse than that is if we open and then have to close again. Then we open and then we have to close again, because I think a lot of the anxiety, not only for us, but certainly for the students and certainly for the parents, is this on again, off again. We're going to, we're not going to. That's just making a bad situation worse. And I think we certainly don't want to be in that position when we open up. So that's my thoughts. I'll open it up to others.
So data from one
makes a good point, with the idea that our primary concern is the students. And I think that's an important thing to consider. And I would say that would take priority in my mind over the community spread, if you will. Not that that's not important, with the exception that once you get a community spread to the point where we see hospitalization numbers that are threatening the ability to get hospital care and get into the emergency room, that's where that sort of has to take a little bit, not that it would take priority over the students from our perspective, but we have to really consider community spread as those numbers get into the red zone versus if they weren't, sure, we are concerned about community spread, but the focus would be, yeah, try to get the kids back into school as quickly and as safely as possible. But that's sort of where, so Kevin, yeah, I agree that we should prioritize the needs of our students, but that's sort of the caveat in my mind is if we contribute in some way, in some even very small way to community spread at a time when our hospitals are being overwhelmed, not that they're seriously overwhelmed, but they're in pretty bad shape in terms of capacity. So that's the only caveat I have.
Yeah, and I need to throw in, look, we can't remove ourselves though from the other part of it. We are an employer, and we have an obligation to our employees as well. All right, so I don't really feel comfortable even making a distinction. Is it either students or our faculty and staff? To me, this is the classic, what I call both and situation. It is both our students and our faculty and staff, because I'm sure all of you who are employed by various companies, you know, what would it be like if your company said the only thing that mattered is your business, and we don't really give a damn what happens to you? I don't think
I've
that.
worked in a place like that.
Yeah, well, probably not for very long, right?
You're right.
I would hope. Okay, so, and that's the only discomfort I have in that, Kevin. Look, let there be no doubt. You know, the students and educating them, that is our primary mission. I don't waffle on that at all. Okay, but in a situation like this, I feel an almost equal obligation not only to our students but to our employees, who I think all of us have agreed on many times is without our employees, we don't deliver to the students that which is our primary mission. So I just wanted to add that. Other thoughts?
Yeah, Pat, but do me a favor. Will you and I and Lisa and Prentice and Rita and everybody spent a lot of time making sure our employees knew they were important.
Yeah.
Knew they were safe.
Yeah.
And things of that nature. And again, that's why I kind of wanted to make sure we emphasize that the employees were ready to go. Whatever last month or whatever it was, right? And again, because we did spend a lot of time, and so I think we do all care about them, but
yeah,
you know, we need to make sure we get that out there.
No, that's fair. Okay, anybody who else would like to say? Casey?
I
don't think there's any question that we have the students' needs and education as our top priority. You know, we spent a lot of time over the last couple months talking about the finances and our duty to the taxpayers in the community. That can't be separate from our duty to the community from a health standpoint either. That all goes into the same bucket, and the students are part of the community. We have to look at it as a whole, not just separate everything out. But no question, the students and their education is our priority. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done the things that we did to make sure that remote learning is as high quality as it can be for our district. So,
okay. Anyone else want to add? Okay,
I'll jump in if you don't mind.
Yep.
One of the articles that you sent out, Pat, I think it was the Science Mag article with the 3 different scenarios.
That was the one with the 3 different parents, if I recall.
Yeah. But one of the conclusions, or one of the statements that was made in there, I believe it was that article, and I apologize if it wasn't, but this is what it said. The best available data suggests infection rates in schools simply mirror the prevalence of COVID-19 in the surrounding community, and that addressing community spread is where our efforts should be focused. And I heard that a few times this evening, but this is a little bit of science that supports that assertion. We heard a number of parents say, you know, we should make education a priority like they are in Europe, but there is a difference. In Europe, they were closing down things that we didn't close down.
Yeah.
You know, we still had a whole bunch of things that were open, and so we weren't slowing the community spread. And Kevin, thank you very much for saying that the teachers are on board, because we got a number of letters that say that the school board is beholden to the union, and it should be noted that they are a partner, that we are in this together, and that the teachers have been, well, they're enthusiastic to see their kids. They want to go back, just like we want all of the kids to go back. Education is our mission. That's what our goal is to educate these students. We are in an unfortunate position where teaching them remotely is the best and safest way right now. I couldn't agree with you more, Pat, that the open, close is a difficulty. I heard Kevin say at the meeting the last time we were together, why are we doing this to the kids where we're opening and closing? Let's just stay out until second semester. And then I heard another parent say that in a letter tonight. I know that we're not looking for a date right now, but in order to avoid the open, close, I would agree with that assertion that it's better to go back in January in order to reduce the community spread, which is a reflection of what's happening in schools. We are going to continue to educate our students. I know that the teachers know that their kids are learning, and I know that there are some kids that are struggling. And that is part of our mission, is to help those kids who are struggling. And we're still looking for ways to do that. I assume we had the conversation last week that we were going to talk about what is it, that safety net that we can throw out there to catch the kids that are not just struggling academically, because that's what we do all the time, but who are emotionally struggling right now. And I would like to hear somebody talk to that point tonight, if possible.
Yeah.
Because we did say we were going to do that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it. I'm in support of getting our kids back in school. I want to do it safely, but I'd like to wait until second semester.
And I would like to jump into, just many of you have made this point already, but I think in the in many of the articles that we've been provided and have dug through, there's been the consistent thought that what has seemed to be working, whether it's Europe or other states, is that the community spread is what really has to be bolted down, so that the kids can, because the school will reflect what it is in the community. I've seen that in many of the different articles. I think we would all think that's probably, the school may not be a super spreader, but it will likely mimic whatever's around us. And I think we need to think about how we, as a community, as our villages, as our families, and as a school, work toward having that be our goal, in order to follow these models that have worked in other places but it's just recently coming out, that we take a real hard look at some of those things and maybe think about altering the way we've been thinking about this as a whole, not just us as school board and as administration. I saw that repeatedly in so many of these articles that people have been kind enough to send our way. So I think that's a big factor. So yes, I do think absolutely we need to try to provide the kids with the best education we possibly can. But I also, I want to go back and remind all of us, as well as those who might be watching, that when we made the decision in the summer to begin in remote learning, we did so because we wanted to establish, after the spring, we wanted to establish a solid, as best we could, plan for providing the best remote learning that we could, always wanting to build on it, but knowing that it was likely, without the advantage of hindsight, but it was likely to be that we would be coming back to remote learning at some point, with all the predictions that people were saying about the fall and how cases were going to spike again. So when we did make the decision to go ahead and move forward into hybrid, it takes a little while to get ready for that. We have to set up the buses, we have to set up the different ways to, to find out how many kids are going to want to come. By the time we got to the point where we were going to get ready to do that, the numbers had spiked. COVID's the enemy. We aren't the enemy. The parents aren't the enemy. The COVID is the enemy. And then when we said, okay, well, let's push it off 2 weeks because we want to look at the data. We're still hoping that we would be able to go back. The numbers continue to go up. With hindsight, you can look at that and say, well, we weren't willing to say, we weren't willing to say that we were going to commit to one way or the other. Well, we always have said all along, we're going to be looking at the numbers. And so I just want to give a little bit of perspective here, that as we've made these decisions and we're moving forward into this nightmare of COVID, You know, we're looking at things without the knowledge of what's coming. And now we're looking at some things with hindsight. And we're saying we did or didn't, you know, we shouldn't or shouldn't have, but we did have that hope that our kids would be back in the building. And the timing proved that, as many had predicted, the numbers really escalated. So I just feel like we need to keep that into the mix here. We found now that because we've had to do that a few times, it's disruptive. So now we have the perspective of that. And we also have the perspective of knowing the cases are really high. I just want to keep some of that in context. I mean, we're making decisions, looking at a lot of data and wanting to move forward in the best way possible. And, you know, that's what it is.
Okay, thanks, Karen. All right, anybody else want to say anything? Otherwise, I want to ask Tom and John a couple questions. All right, so I guess I would ask Tom and John, can you give us a perspective? How are the kids doing? What are we doing for those kids that are struggling? And how is that working for us?
Go ahead, guys.
Well, starting academically, both Vernon Hills High School and Libertyville High School have been looking at student academics. We've done a couple of different types of comparisons with data analysis, but two in particular are to look at our Progress 1 grades this year versus Progress 1 grades last year, as well as to look at Progress 2 grades this year compared to Progress 2 grades last year. Obviously, Progress 1 and 2 last year, we were not in eSchool. Progress 1 and 2 this year, we are. Both schools have seen a sort of a bifurcation of the data. We have at Libertyville High School, we have approximately 2/3 of our students or more whose grades have either stayed the same or students who are getting in general, students who were largely getting A's and B's last year are getting A's and B's this year, and some at a higher level. But unfortunately, we are also seeing then another third, approximate number of students who, if they were getting 1 D and F last year, they might be receiving more D and Fs this year in their classes. And some students who had never received a D and F showing up on that list as we run that. So it is very true that there are students who are doing extremely well in eSchool, better in some ways than they had before. But it is also equally true that we are seeing students who are struggling in eSchool. And as a statement for Libertyville, those who are struggling, their struggles are greater and broader than what we were used to seeing last year. I'll stop there and let John speak to his academic review.
Yeah, I wouldn't say ours is markedly different than that. You know, I've heard it kind of described as a reverse bell curve. In other words, the kids that are kind of finding their groove with eSchool, finding that education remotely serves their purposes well, and they have the resources and access to do well. And truth be told, you talk to our counselors, and there are a lot of students who will tell them that they like eSchool better for whatever reason. That just anecdotally, that is a thing. And so, like Tom said, we have more students at this last marking period with A grades than we did last year for sure. But to Tom's point, we do have you know, over 100% more students with D's and F's at this marking period than we had at last marking period. And I will tell you that our trend over the last 5 years was that number was decreasing at a pretty linear rate. We had got it down to approximately, you know, 180 D and F grades, and that mark has shifted pretty considerably. I like to think that we were making great strides on that before the pandemic. So I think academically, I'm convinced that it is not an issue with our teachers. They are killing it in the classroom on an e-school level. But we do have, to the question that you posed, Don, earlier, from an SEL standpoint, we are struggling with engagement with a certain percentage of our kids. And when I look at, we have a DNF list right now going, and it has, it's a spreadsheet with all sorts of columns, identifiers of who these kids are, the programs that they're in, the supports that they're in. And one of those columns is counselor comments. And to read through that and see home visits, Zoom with the parents, multiple, Zoom calls with the student, just the amount of effort going into reaching these kids, attempting to reach these kids at a real meaningful way. I've never seen anything like it. And obviously we're in a pandemic. I hope I don't have to see anything like it again, but I'm telling you that our LST staff is working hard. They're working hard to build relationship. And that's not just with the student, that's with the families at all as well. Like I said, our school vehicles are in use every day as deans and counselors go out visiting homes, touching base with students, making sure that there's a connection to a family. And I will say that some of these parents are feeling the same struggle. Like, how is it that we get this child engaged? We're opening our schools. We're opening our schools in a school academic resource capacity, inviting kids in. And obviously we've done less of that now that the metrics have shot up so high. But we still continue to bring children in. We had our extracurriculars rolling again as an attempt to give kid connections back to school and fulfill some of those needs. Our social workers are working outstandingly hard to meet individual student needs. So they're doing individual kind of social work sessions with kids, as well as group session with kids to try to figure out what it is at the crux of some of these engagement issues. So I jumped into some of the SEL work that's being done. Tom, I'll let you add to that if you want.
Well, just very quickly, the SEL is a bit trickier to measure, though we are able to do that looking at our counseling reports, as John reported, as well as the check-ins that we are doing frequently with students. And this, if you're a parent of a child who is struggling, it is horrible, and it is a terrible experience to go through, to see your child in hardship. And of course, you want to do everything you can to support your child and help them. And we do as well. And as John said, we're doing a lot of both proactive and reactive programs and supports when we encounter those students. But in general, we're also believing that the vast majority of our students are doing well in eSchool with their social emotional. Yes, at Libertyville, the vast majority of the students report they want to be back in school. They're ready to be back in school. They tell us that all the time, but they also report that they're getting through, that they are finding ways to be resilient and connected, and that they're staying healthy. We are constantly looking to promote the health and wellness of our kids in proactive, positive ways through engagement and through education. And then all of our resources are in place when we identify a student who is in crisis or in just a more intensive place, needing more support. we are quick to respond to those as well. Overall, I don't have an exact number of how that has increased or decreased from last year. I would say it is up a little bit, but not markedly so at this point.
Yeah, just a comment from me. I'm meeting with our area superintendents once a week on Wednesdays, and we talk about student success in a remote environment because all of the schools in our immediate area are in remote learning right now. The data that Tom and John are talking about is endemic at all of the schools in our area, and kids that depend on and need the structure of school, that need the connections within the school building, and need the the immediate support, hands-on support, are those kids, in fact, who are not being as successful or not successful in school. So that experience crosses a number of schools and is consistent from school to school. The team has been meeting. They met again for a couple hours this morning, and we'll be implementing additional interventions coming up, and we'll be reporting out on that more at the December 7th P&P meeting when we move forward. But we've identified where the issues are, strategies, as John and Tom have talked about, that we're already using, and which is, in many cases over and above already, but what other strategies we can implement to help those kids be more successful.
Prentice, if I could just add one thing that I do think John would echo as well, and it's been brought up tonight. When I had a touch base, kind of a pulse check with about 40 students last week, and one of the number one things that the students from Libertyville reported was the frustration and the difficulty with not knowing kind of what was going to happen with the schedule and over the next 2 weeks. So I do hear from students a real hunger for stability in terms of a kind of plan moving forward. A source of stress for them that has been brought up is, the discussions and the potential changes and the sort of short-term plans that they have to make.
Maybe the last thing I'll throw in there is that, as we look at these numbers of kids who are struggling, and we're talking about struggling both academically and perhaps at an engagement level, I think for a lot of us, our goal or our desire is to get them in, get our hands on them, get them working with our staff. But I have to be honest, and our story is a little bit different than Libertyville, of course, but at its highest point, we had about 40% of our kids deciding to come back into a hybrid setting, right? 60% staying home. And that number, since the metrics have gone up, has decreased in terms of the numbers coming back. We're closer to the low 30s in terms of percent coming back into hybrid. And of the kids that are struggling, even smaller percentage of those kids have a plan to be back into the building. So our goal is to get to them, get our hands on them, but we got to get them here in order to do that. So one of our goals moving forward is to really make a push to make connections with home and with families, to kind of stress the importance of getting some of these students back into our buildings in an intervention kind of way.
Thanks, Tom, John. All right. Any other questions for John, Tom, or Prentice on that? All right. Is there anybody that believes we should proceed to open as we discussed in the last meeting, which would have been right after Thanksgiving?
Date's November 30th. That was the original date, Pat, that we reestablished.
I do not.
Okay. I'm seeing a general shake of no. I don't feel a need to vote on that. I just want to know if anybody feels strongly that we should move forward. Okay. Given
that, Pat, did anybody? I'm sorry, I missed what you said. Oh, you were giving everybody a chance to respond. Okay, sorry.
Hey, Pat. Yeah, no, I obviously I'm usually the voice who says, let's get this thing going, right? And I still think we need to get the thing going, but at the last meeting, and I'm going to reiterate, I do think we need to do this. We need to give the kids and the community some certainty. So, with November 30th probably being off the table, are we going to discuss setting a firm date and actually sticking to it? And that's why I kind of brought up the metrics issue before. I mean, our number one responsibility is to the kids. We need to set a date and we need to stick to it unless something catastrophic happens, because those metrics are arbitrary. They're going to fluctuate up and down and things like that. So again, I'm okay moving on from the 30th, but I do hope that we're going to set something kind of pretty firm and not sit here and probably meet on it and every other week and try to debate the metrics. That's what, and again, I don't want to dismiss the metrics. They're important, but at the end of the day, I just think we have to get the kids back in school. And in fact, one could argue based on the chart you showed me with the kids, that keeping the kids out of school, you pointed it out yourselves. It looks like the spread rate's pretty high in that group somehow. So they may be safer in school with masks, with sanitation, with hand washing, with spacing, with supervisors watching them. So, I want to make sure that we do understand. I'm hoping we're going to try to put something firm down. Yes? No?
Yeah.
Maybe?
No,
I would say firm for sure. I don't think anybody disagrees that we want to pick a firm date and stick to it. I think that's what we wanted all along. In the case of tonight, I agree that we want to pick a date that we feel firm about. We do have to consider the possibility that if there is some governing body that prevents us from re-entering the buildings, we will follow all local and state guidelines. We're not going to go against any order from the governor or from the Lake County Department of Health in order to meet the date that we agree on tonight.
Well, I guess that's where I have to disagree. I certainly won't go against the governor. If he shuts the schools, we're shut down. But if a recommending health body for the community's purpose says that they recommend we be in remote, I say for the kids' purpose, we get them back to school. And that's just me. And that's where, we may disagree on that, but that's why I kind of brought up the metrics issue. If the governor shuts the schools, we have no choice. He has yet to shut the schools. We've had a choice in September, October, November. We're going to have another choice whenever we decide another date.
Okay, I'm going to only disagree with you on the point that if the Lake County Department of Public Health asks us to remain in pause, that I will agree to push it back in order to comply with the public health experts. Not just looking at metrics and making arbitrary decisions on our part to go against something like what they did where we pushed it off a couple of weeks ago. If they say that we need to make an adaptive pause, I guess I would have to look at it at the time, but I'm telling you, I'm going to disagree with you and go along with the public health experts and not go against their recommendations.
Well, then we're giving the community no certainty because we're not deciding to do what's in the best interest of kids. We're doing what's in the best interest of the
that is not a binary thing, Kevin. We're not going to go against what's in the best interest of the kids. It's more complex than that. And we have to take into account our responsibility to the kids and the teachers and everybody in our buildings and our community. Not a binary decision, Kevin.
Lisa, I actually interviewed you for the board and I asked you this question and you unequivocally said kids, and then you said teachers, and then you said taxpayer.
Kevin, were we in the midst of a global pandemic?
Kevin,
were we in the midst of a global pandemic?
Is it to the kids or not?
I'm not going to answer that question, Kevin.
Right. So again, we don't want to force it into an either or situation. It's what I said earlier. I mean, all of those are important. It's fine to prioritize those, but I think they're all important. Does anybody else want to speak to that? Otherwise, I think Prentice and I are going to make a recommendation here.
Yeah, put two questions. Okay. And I think the first question that you had to deal with, you've dealt with, I think, unless somebody, wants to be heard on that. And that are we going back on November 30th? So in hearing no response, I'm assuming that we're not going back on November 30th. So I do, Pat, if this is an appropriate place, I do have a recommendation for us for the board to consider. And then if you would allow me to finish the recommendation. And if I miss something, Rita or somebody can jump in on the recommendation. But I'll make a recommendation to you that I think processes several things that we've talked about over the last couple of meetings, and we're certainly talking about tonight. Then we can discuss it a little further, or you can discuss it, and we can be a part of that discussion wherever you need us to be. And then I would ask somebody to make a motion and then take a vote on it. So here would be our recommendation. Our recommendation would be that the first day for students coming back to hybrid would be Tuesday, January 19th. Okay, now I'm going to work backwards here because I want to stake the date out here first. So Tuesday, January 19th.
Just to say, Monday's a holiday, just because I
Yes,
know.
I was just going to say Monday is Martin Luther King holiday. So the first day back in hybrid with students and teachers in the building together would be Tuesday, January 19th. So hybrid would begin on that date. Okay.
And that is the beginning of the second semester, correct?
That is also the beginning of the second semester. Karen, that is correct. You guys are too smart for me. You're one step ahead of me on that. That was correct. We're recommending that we plant a flag here. And that flag is that we start on the 19th unless the governor has us in, a state pause in public education. So that plants that flag. Now, could something else happen along the way that one or more of you bring up and say, oh my gosh, it's so bad, we want to talk about it? Certainly that would be at your discretion, of course, as school board members. Will we have that conversation with you? Of course we would. Okay, will we work with you on that conversation? Of course we would. But in theory, it plants a flag that we're coming back to school on the 19th of January. And if it's bad enough for the governor, in this case, to take us back to phase 3, because if you think about this conceptually right now, remember we are currently in phase 4. There's tier 1, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. The whole state was in tier 1. He put a few counties in tier 2. And then when the data got bad, he skipped to tier 3. And in his press conference a week ago on Tuesday, which many of you watched, he said, look, the bottom line here is I'm giving you one more chance to do what you need to do. And if you don't do that, I don't want to shut us down again, but we're going back to phase 3. And when we go back to phase 3, okay, public schools are shut down. That's what we were in March. So that stakes a day out. Now, let me work backwards up to that. Okay, I'm going to go now to the beginning of January. We come back after winter break. Our recommendation would be that we have the teachers return on January 4th, just teachers, no students. Okay, that will allow the teachers an opportunity to acclimate to our protocols and procedures, to get comfortable being in the building, to being around larger groups of people again. And that is a real thing, by the way. It will also allow a transition period to get ready for hybrid, but also to finish up semester 1 and get ready for semester 2. Okay. And then on January 6th, if the board will recall several times that we've talked to you, I think even going back to October the original October 29th start date, we'd indicated that we needed a couple of days of professional learning to make that transition from full remote to hybrid, to get used to using technology, make sure workstations are set up, that we had everything in place. So what we're recommending at this point is we still need a day, all right? We really still do need 2 days, but we're recommending 1 day tonight, just in the greater good of the conversation. And that day would be Wednesday, January 6th. So Wednesday, January 6th would be a teacher professional learning day. It would not be asynchronous. It would not be teacher directed. It would be a professional learning day to get ready to make the pivot at the end of the month or on January 19th toward the middle of the month, to actually make that pivot. So let me go through this one more time so we've got it. And I'll go in, now I'll go in early date order to later date order. So January 4th, all teachers return. Okay, acclimation, transition, finish semester 1, finish semester 2, and work on getting ready for hybrid. Okay, January.
Just to clarify on that, they're going to return and teach the current remote.
Yes, in remote.
From the classroom.
Right, in remote.
Just so
Hybrid will not start until January 19th, okay? So January 4th, teachers return. January 6th, teacher professional learning day to prepare for specifically the return to hybrid learning on January 19th, okay? No classes, so that for students is a day off of school. Can teachers on Tuesday give students things to do during that time, but it's not asynchronous and it's not a teacher directed day, okay, on the 6th, right? And then on Tuesday, January 19th, because Monday is Martin Luther King Day, hybrid begins. And again, okay, we would only not start hybrid on that date if the governor has taken us to a level that we cannot be in school. Now, again, to Kevin's point or Lisa's point, as they were talking back and forth, you know, are there other dynamics that cause those conversation? Of course there is, right? But in general, that would be the watermark on that. And that makes a definitive statement that we're moving towards opening at second semester. I will add, although that's not part of our decision-making and hasn't been, that that dovetails with virtually all of the public high schools in the area and the decisions that they are making in terms of coming back at the start of second semester. So let me look around.
Can you just remind real quick, are there no finals for anybody, or is it the teacher's discretion first semester?
Rita, go ahead.
Yeah, at the first semester, teaching teams made a decision this summer during the professional learning days whether they would choose to administer some form of final assessment. We don't have a final exam schedule for the last 3 days of the semester, but they have the option to administer a final assessment or project, or to simply measure student mastery of learning goals through the work that they've done all semester without a final culminating assessment. So teams had the discretion to determine for their course what type of final assessment, if any, would be given.
And the reason we chose Wednesday the 6th instead of a day the next week is that we already have teachers that are planning end of semester activities. And if we went Wednesday of that week, it would, potentially really disturb plans that teachers already have in place for that last week as we enter. So Pat, just a couple of things for me and then I'll stop talking. Go ahead, Rita.
I was just going to say, and you will recall that as we started the year, each school district has granted 5 remote learning planning days. We used 3 of those days for the early professional learning and reserved 2, understanding that there would be some need for teachers to both transition to hybrid, but also prepare for second semester with at least some time that they had preparing for first semester in August. So we had reserved those 2 days and we're hoping to use one of them on that. We're recommending to use one of those on Wednesday, January 6th, which means we would still have one of the remote learning planning days granted by ISB for future use if needed. So that is a day that counts as a student attendance day, but students are not in attendance.
So is the end of the semester still the 13th of January?
Yes, the 14th is a grading day and the 15th is a non-attendance day.
Okay, and then those are teacher work days, is that correct?
The 14th is a teacher work day, the 15th is not.
Everybody, okay.
Yeah,
and then that gives everybody a long weekend.
Right, it's built into the calendar, Don. So Pat, a couple of
so again, to be clear though, the date of January 19th was the originally planned start of the second semester.
Right.
Originally planned from our change,
Yes.
Originally planned in a normal school year, but originally planned when we altered the calendar to add the 2 weeks of professional learning.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that our action tonight is not changing the planned start date of second semester.
So
Okay.
Pat, just a couple of other things. Okay, so what would be a rationale for pushing the date out to the end of the semester? And as we know, is the data is very concerning right now for everyone in our local communities, in the county, in the state, and in the country right now. But we also know that we're moving into a Thanksgiving holiday period where students are returning home from college. I'm happy to report that my junior daughter at the University of Kentucky has just arrived at home safely. So that's good news to finish her semester, final exams at home, which is what they're doing there. But we have to be cautious about the 2 or 3 week period after the Thanksgiving holiday because there is concern, will people do what they need to do in terms of isolating, not gathering in bigger numbers? And then when we come back from the winter holiday, and we're going to go through a very similar period here. So this fixes a date, plants a flag at the semester with a fairly high threshold. On the back work of this gets our staff back in the building together, comfortable with the health and safety protocol, the PPE that would need to be in place, allows us to do transition work on finishing up first semester and looking towards second semester. So it is a logical and we believe the right place to look at starting.
Can I ask a question? I assume that there would be another opportunity for families to decide whether or not to come back, and when would we have that established? Because that'll have to do with our planning for the second semester. Or would we just stick with what people have said?
Yeah, we've made some preliminary timelines. We haven't solidified them yet administratively, but we would be doing so immediately. And have some clarity on this, and then, but it would be an option for all students at both schools to be able to tell us if they wanted to be in second semester as e-school full-time or to be in hybrid. And we would be sending out information to families most likely before winter break for them to make that determination.
And then they'll do the sorting. Then they'll do the sorting from that point forward, just like we did before.
And would they be held to their decision for the entire semester, like we were holding them to the?
Well, if they're coming in, yes, they can opt out, but they can't opt back in.
And if we had, well, maybe this is getting too far ahead of ourselves, but if the vaccine has become available, if people, if things have taken a decided turn and we decide to move to full attendance, students would still have the option. And
well, we'd have to see, Karen. We'd have to know,
I mean,
we'd have to
it's
know the
getting too far
efficacy
ahead of
of the
ourselves. Okay.
vaccine.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah,
it is.
There may still be some people in the community. I mean, there may be some of the community that don't want to get vaccinated and therefore don't want to send their kid back. So my crystal ball says it's probably going to be difficult to not continue to have some option for virtual learning through this year. But again, let's see. It'd be a wonderful problem to have that we can get every student vaccinated and everybody chooses to do it, at which point, yes, let's get back and finish the year strong.
And probably having testing in place.
Great
If
question.
we can do some diagnostic testing, I think that's part of a decision-making process. But I think we'll just have to monitor and see, Karen. It is a really good question, and see how this progresses. And I'm going to get good information every week from Mark Pfister at Lake County Health Department. He does a great job of keeping this updated. So we'll be able to see, I think, what's coming down the line.
Yeah. And then to your point on the diagnostic testing, I mean, if we are able to implement the screening program and we see that the prevalence across our population is very, very low, that may open up other opportunities to, I'll say, be more open. So that would also be a good problem to have. Okay, again, to be clear, this recommendation is that, and I think Prentice was actually a little open-minded on the options going forward. I believe this recommendation is that unless the governor, or I'll call it higher authorities, i.e. the President of the United States, close the schools, we will open on January 19th. All right.
That's the recommendation, Pat.
And I just want to be clear that that's the flag that we're planning here. And I'll say openly, I believe that's the right thing to do given the body of evidence we have in front of us. Lisa, the one comment I'll make, even from the Lake County perspective, I mean, Mark Pfister has a tough job in the sense that he's got to make a recommendation that spans across the county. And again, I think the reason it's a recommendation is even within our county, different communities are in fact different. So when, while I was here, I just quickly looked up positivity rates for some of our northern communities in Lake County. They're running twice what ours are. So we're 8%, they're 16% plus. And so I do think it's important for us to really think locally, again, in the context of all of the data that we're looking at, including the ever building evidence that the spread in schools is, I'll at least say, manageable. That might seem in conflict with a recommendation from Lake County, but it may in fact be what they intend, in the sense that their recommendation is in fact not guidance and it's not binding on every community.
And Pat, I completely agree. And I regret that I took the bait on a cheap shot. But I have to say, my concern about the Lake County, I appreciate that they're giving us local decision-making power.
Absolutely.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
So my concern is, from a liability perspective, since Prentice has informed us on an ongoing basis that if we are negligent in any way to conform with recommendations, that we're liable. We don't have liability protection if someone gets sick and dies.
Well, again, I think
so we have to be very mindful of the extent of the recommendations and where they're coming from. I am all in for starting in the spring semester, short of the governor or some other higher public body closing us. Okay. So there should be no misinterpretation that I disagree, because I'm fully on board with that idea.
Okay. Okay. And again, I think from a liability perspective, I think what we've said in the past, IDPH is guidance we must comply with.
Yes.
Lake County Public Health, I think we've always said they were recommendations, but they were not binding in the same sense that IDPH was. Is that correct?
In this case, Pat, that is accurate.
Okay.
Can I just add, and not to belabor this, but I think that we would be wise to remember all the different information we're starting to get on many of the different articles that have come in about how important the community spread, and being super careful about closing down more of what's around us. And it's so complex, because of course we want to help our businesses and our restaurants, and I don't know what the answer is exactly, but I think we really need to engage with our civic leaders in light of some of this more informed information that we've gotten in the last few weeks, and try to work together with them in this period of time to sort of shift our thinking before we come back. I just think, it would be great to engage on that. And now that we have this kind of newer way of looking at the way it's done in other places.
Yeah, because let's be clear, even from January on, there's still a lot of winter left, which means engagements are still inside. All of the things that are driving the rates up today will still exist in January. All right. And so it's going to be incumbent on all of us to be smart and do the right things. I mean, again, Gottlieb's comments were, you want to leave schools open, but in order to do that, you have to do those other things well. All right. And, I think Pritzker's taken a pretty hard line on not closing schools so far, but I think he's very willing to do it if he has to, if things continue to deteriorate, which fortunately they don't seem to be doing. So if we all do our part, we will be successful here. And unfortunately, I believe the corollary to that is true as well. If we don't, we run the risk of failure. Okay. And I think in this case, I think all of us should agree whatever Facebook group you're on or whatever side of town, in the interest of the kids, we all need to do the right things here. Okay. Okay.
So Pat,
yeah.
that's my recommendation on behalf of the leadership team.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to accept that recommendation.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
I just think the everybody involved, I think the administration, I think it's a well thought out plan. I like the idea of setting the stake in the ground. I like the idea of giving us a couple weeks after the busy travel holiday season. As we see the numbers now over Thanksgiving, millions of people are traveling. It just makes sense to try to avoid any kind of complicating factors. But yet it gives a definitive, I think we owe it to the kids. I think we owe it to the parents and to the staff that here's our date. This is what we're targeting. This is what we're planning for. And let's all move forward to that.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Batson,
Aye.
Carmichael,
Aye.
Grudy.
Aye.
Hessel,
Aye.
Huber,
Aye.
Lundstedt,
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries.
Hey, Pat, could I say one more thing before we leave?
No.
Okay,
No, go ahead.
I'll stop. I just want to echo, Kevin made a comment, you've commented, all the board members have commented on it at some point. But it bears saying, and I want folks to hear the superintendent of the school district that's been here for 15 years and lived and worked with, the community, the parents, the kids, and the staff here, that there has been a narrative that's been woven in the public that some people have latched onto, that somehow the teachers have been in a cabal or an arrangement with the administration and the board to keep schools from opening. And Kevin really hit the nail on the head earlier. I've spent hundreds of hours with Dennis Duffy. Pat and Lisa and Kevin have spent hundreds of hours with the association impact bargaining team. And at no time has our union ever said, we're not coming back to work. Have no time have they pressured the board along that lines to say, if you open school, we're not coming back to work. Has the union advocated for the health and safety of their members? Yes, they have. Should the union advocate for the health and safety of their members? That's exactly what they should be doing, is engaging in conversations with the administration and the board to make sure the teachers and the support staff, who they don't represent, on the other staff in the building, are healthy and safe. Yes, they should. And that's been a vibrant give and take discussion, but at no time during those discussions has the union ever said to us, we're not coming back to work if you tell us to come back to work. And so it's important because there is a narrative that's gained a life on social media in some places that is still weaving that story. And that story is absolutely, positively incorrect with no basis. And I just want to reinforce what others of you have said in the past. Pat has certainly said that, but I also want to say that as a superintendent in your district and somebody that for the last 30 years has worked with unions in 5 different districts. We have a great union here that represents the best teaching staff in the United States, which is the reason that we produce the results that we've produced over the last 15 years here. And so the teachers, Lisa, Kevin, somebody said earlier, Karen, the teachers are not the enemy. The support staff is not the enemy. The administrators are not the enemy, and the board is not the enemy. We're dealing with a once in a lifetime pandemic environment, and we're all doing the best that we can. And at the end of the day, that's all we can do. So we appreciate everybody's input. We appreciate everybody's adaptability and flexibility. But let's not hang the teachers out to dry here because they don't deserve to be hung out to dry. Thank you for listening.
All right. Good job. Anybody else? Okay. I believe that's all we got tonight, right? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Any discussion? Not, roll call, please.
Carmichael,
Aye.
Grudy. Oh, you're muted, Pat.
Aye.
Thank you. Hessel,
Aye.
Huber,
Aye.
Lundstedt,
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
Batson.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a great
Good night,
Thanksgiving.
all.